Michael J.
So, I think that the interesting thing about Modern right now is that we're seeing some good Strixhaven additions specifically to red decks.
You would, but there's stuff in other spots too, but no denying the immediate impact in a variety of different types of red decks.
Yeah.
What caught your eye, up front?
Two in particular, and yes, there are other interesting utilizations of Strixhaven in other decks, but I was just thinking, like, the most explicit one to me, like, if you were to look at the Modern League from, I want to say it's May 11th.
Yep.
There's a red-white beatdown deck, 5-0 red-white beatdown deck played by Pepe Apple, and this deck is just like, I don't know if it's fair to say that it's something new or if this is just like a better version of something that has existed in the past, but my God, is this deck streamlined, and my God, is this deck like reminiscent of old decks while at the same time being like utterly Strixhaven.
So I do think this is something new because even though it's taking from a couple things that aren't new, it's putting them together in a formula that has a different pacing than we've seen. First of all, usually these kind of decks, you would normally have in this deck in something like this blue, right? And so, like,
yeah, that's the other take. I think you could talk about.
If you didn't have blue, you might still be Rakdos or mono red, even red green, but like red white is pretty low on the list of combinations you would ever do this sort of thing in, at least before Clever Lumimancer and Leonin Light Scribe. Additionally, the amount that this deck is able to kind of capitalize on the Niv Magus Elemental technology, like we've already seen in the past, Ground Rift with Niv Magus Elemental, because obviously when you storm a whole bunch, then you get to Niv Magus Elemental harder. But with the addition of Leonin Light Scribe and Clever Lumimancer, which each get bonuses for every storm copy, Ground Rift takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, so this deck is I don't even know. Is this like a red aggro deck? It's like a combo stompy deck that happens to be red.
Yeah. No. This is definitely, in my opinion, this deck is kind of a hybrid of Storm and really just it's mostly a Storm deck, but I guess it has some properties of like a linear aggro, Infect.
Is this like, yeah,
it's not a red aggro deck at all.
No,
I mean, there's 4 Lava Darts and 4 Lightning Bolts and 4 Gut Shots, but Lava Dart and Gut Shot are not exactly the most reliable way to get your creatures through. They're mostly just combo enablers. This is very much a Infect deck meets a Storm deck.
Like I think the way that you described the Lava Spike deck in years past, although it's funny that this is the Lava Spike deck that just doesn't happen to have Lava Spike.
Well, see, I don't know. I guess it's it's not really a Lava Spike deck as much as it is an Infect or a Storm deck, though. Because even Lava Spike decks, the big thing is they avoid the reliance on creatures.
Yeah.
Whereas this deck is extraordinarily reliant on creatures.
Oh, it has a ton of cards like Ground Rift, Assault Strobe, and
Mutagenic Growth.
Mutagenic Growth that have very little text if you don't have a creature, right? So
you're also just not dealing 20 without creatures.
Oh, yeah, I don't think you mathematically can unless your opponent does hella damage to themselves with Fetchlas and Painlands, right? So,
you can. You got 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Lava Darts, and 4 Gut Shots. Yeah.
12. You can.
4 Lightning Bolts
That's
and 4
20,
Lava Darts.
It's 24.
That's 24.
Okay.
You got
All
the
right.
4 Gut Shots extra.
Okay. All right, so the way this works is, like, the super dreamiest draw is you're like, first turn Clever Lumimancer, your opponent plays a land that comes into play tapped, You look at your hand and you're like, yes, that is in fact 2 Manamorphosis, right? And you just play your second land, Manamorphose a couple of times, like Mutagenic Growth and Assault Strobe, and that's it, right? Like, just get that Clever Lumimancer to 20 or to 10 with Double Strike, and it's over.
Yeah, and you don't even necessarily need the Double Strike. It's kind of like a cherry on top, but it's not like an accident that there's only 2 copies of Assault Strobe in here. The far more important card is Ground Rift, because for example the opening you were describing. If you've got 2 Manamorphoses, a Mutagenic Growth, a Lava Dart, and a Ground Rift, that's 1, 2, and keep in mind, that sounds like a lot of cards, but you did draw some cards off the Manamorphose. But that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11. That's 22 damage, 24 damage, 26 damage. That's 26 damage. So you don't even need all that. If you just had 1 Manamorphose but you get the point.
There's a lot of ways to get there on turn 2. That's the...
Well, and you remember, Ground Rift is just a way better Assault Strobe in this deck. And, okay, so there's a couple things going on. First, Ground Rift makes all your creatures unblockable.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they might have a flyer, but for the most part, your creatures are unblockable. Second of all, because Ground Rift, even if they have no creatures, you can use it on your own creature, of course. But when you Ground Rift... if you already played 4 spells this turn, then Ground Rift is worth +10/+10 to your Lumimancer.
Because Clever Lumimancer and Leonin Lightscribe, the Magecraft ability on those guys is not just when you cast a spell, like it is with like Monastery Swiftspear, right? It's when you cast or copy a spell. So
right.
All those storms are very bad mojo for your opponent.
Right, and we see so many ways to take advantage of that. Lava Dart giving you 2 spells for 1 mana. Mutagenic Growth, a spell for no mana. Manamorphose, a spell for no mana. Gut Shot, a spell for no mana. This is a deck with a lot of turn 2 kill potential and pretty effortlessly can turn 3 if your opponent stumbles.
Yeah,
that's its plan against combo. That's why you see a sideboard with stuff like Shattering Spree and Core Firewalker. This isn't a deck that has to try to disrupt your combo deck.
They can just kill you.
Right.
One of the things I love about this deck is that because of the 4 copies of Manamorphose, this is just like one of the best Core Firewalker decks, right? Like, you could just cast it easily. Like, Core Firewalker is obviously a card that has been played to various levels of popularity in Naya, Boros, beatdown decks in Modern. It's kind of flitted in and out of popularity, but a deck with Manamorphose has no problems casting it, right? Like, a lot of those...
Yeah, and this deck has 15 white anyway.
Yeah. A lot of them have, like, only 2 or 3 basic mountains, but still, you potentially stumble on that card. This one, I think, very low likelihood.
You do got to be careful, though, since you can't Assault Strobe or Ground Rift your own Firewalker.
Yeah, I think in the games when you have Core Firewalker, you're probably playing trying to play like a more traditional game of Magic against those guys and comboing them less. Or the other thing is your guys can just get bigger.
I don't know. That's the thing is I don't think you're playing a traditional game. I just think that you're really getting a lot of mileage out of Leonin Lightscribe and Niv Magus Elemental. Like you're just making. You have some threats that can just really take over.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons that my bias would go in that direction is just you've got these cards that are like 1/1 or 0/1, or I guess maybe 1/2 on turn 1. Against in the matchups where Core Firearch is good, those guys have always got like a lot of lightning bolts and lava darts of their own. They can just beat up your guys before you can start pumping them sometimes. So that's a very durable threat. But of course, when you've got a card like Leonin Lightscribe, your Core Firewalker is going to be a bigger threat offensively than just defensively.
I also think this is a great Lurrus of the Dream Den deck. You might be like, isn't Lurrus really slow for this turn 2, turn 3 kill deck? Well, if your opponent is playing like an attrition-y game, like if they got a bunch of cheap removal, if your opponent lightning bolts you and terminates you, it's so good to have the ability to reload and just have that extra card that, like, very frequently gives you 2 threats. Like, you get to play the Lurrus of the Dream Den, and then immediately in the same turn play a Swift Spear or a Niv Magus Elemental or something. And now they have to kill the Lurrus of the Dream Den, or you can keep going. But you also are just up another threat. So in many ways, it's frequently going to be 2 extra threats without even needing to use a card, which really can help make up for the number of, bricks this deck is capable of drawing.
I think that one of the real important things about that plan, which I agree is a wonderful plan, especially against anybody just trying to maybe kill your creatures with lightning bolts, etc., is that you can, quote-unquote, tap out for Lurrus of the Dream Den and like one, I guess, say 4 mana, you're like Lurrus and a guy, or even just tap out for Lurrus on the third turn if that's what you decide. I guess it wouldn't be the third turn because you have to put it in your hand, but you know what I'm saying. Tap out for Lurrus. You can Mutagenic Growth with no mana up to save Lurrus from certain removal. I think that's just like in the range and very bad for the other player.
Sure. The Shattering Spree has extra utility, of course, since it makes many, many copies, which can give you a ton of triggers. And so,
also, if
you're
copying Shattering Spree, it's generally really bad for the opponent.
Well, the thing, you say that, but keep in mind, most of the time, a red aggro deck would not want to sideboard in a Shattering Spree against, like, for instance, say somebody with just Mesmeric Orb in their deck, right?
Yeah, maybe not.
But if you can board in, and I don't know for sure if it's worth it bringing in the Tormod's Crypt and shutting off their, gain 21, their massive life gain cards. But the fact that you can sideboard in Tormod's Crypt and have a potential target, so that, like, if you're in a matchup where your opponent has like a really, really high impact card you need to destroy, but they don't have that many. If they have graveyard cards and you can actually have the Tormod's Crypt, being able to Shattering Spree your own Tormod's Crypt many, many, many times is a potential combo card.
Oh, that is exciting. I think that obviously this deck is just built so differently than red decks that we've seen in the past. Typically, the Shattering Spree slot here would be occupied by a card, kind of on the order of, Smash to Smithereens, something.
Nah, you're thinking of, no.
In red decks past, I'm saying.
I know, this isn't even a red deck, though. This is a Storm deck or an Infect deck. You're not trying to play Smash to Smithereens in a Storm deck or an Infect deck.
I agree with you. I was also struggling early on about how I would categorize this in my mind. But this is still a deck that I would be willing to play. So, it's all.
Oh, totally.
You did mention the blue version also, which I think is benefited from Strixhaven.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at from the Modern Prelim on 5/12. Patrick 50.
I had a feeling you were going to go this way.
I mean, I can't imagine that it would be a surprise to you. This is a deck that is a very similar to that red-white deck. It's a little slower, I think, than that red-white deck, but it's got Expressive Iteration as its addition from Strixhaven, which I gotta say, I'm more excited to try this version because I think this has got a lot of play to it.
And, I mean, the other thing you get for being the slower build is that Sprite Dragon and Stormwing Entity both have flying, which can, if it's the type of game where you anticipate. I like the Ground Rift so much better, though, as a way to get your threats through rather than playing bigger, slower flying threats.
Yeah.
What is it you like about the blue here? Is it just that Expressive Iteration is so powerful of a card?
Well, no, I like having a little bit of flexibility in different matchups. So, like the red-white deck, if you were going to play against Primeval Titan decks and Storm combo decks, actually, Storm combo decks have never been a problem for red decks in Modern, but like Primeval Titan decks, I think are a really good example. A lot of the decks that are traditionally the decks that beat up on red decks, that red-white deck can just kill them before they can do the thing that's hard. Like
that's because I think it's not at all a red aggro.
Yeah, it's not a red aggro
deck.
deck.
Think
right?
about it. It's like is Primeval Titan beating the Infect deck and Storm deck consistently.
It's Storm deck is good against Primeval Titan deck, right? So
you can't be hypnotized by the Swift Spear, man. Swift Spear gets around.
I hate to break it to you, but I am perhaps the most hypnotized by Swift Spear player there is. But this deck has a lot of the same oomph, right? It's got Metamorphose, it's got Mutagenic Growth, but this is like much more resembles a red deck in Modern, even to a card like Vapor Snag. Like, Vapor Snag is a card that has the flavor of a Searing Blaze, right? This is like a 1-mana Searing Blaze that can get their giant creature. So I like it from that angle. So this is much closer to a traditional red aggro deck, I think, even though it's got that Metamorphose Mutagenic Growth aspect to it.
So what do you think of just putting Expressive Iteration in the Boros deck? Plus, if you want any amount of, like, Sideboard Dispel or Spell Pierce or anything like that, all that can be worked out. But, like, Expressive Iteration seems like it could be kind of an exciting... Maybe it's just a worse Lurrus of the Dream Den, though.
In the Boros deck?
Yeah.
I have a tough time. I think, like, you would just have tough times casting your cards. We just want to go, like, mono Raph Levy circa 2004. Like, or actually it's a little later than that. 2006 Raph Levy.
Playing 3 colors is not exactly the biggest ask.
Yeah, but I think that you got to transform your mana base from being a mana base that's about, like, Spire Bluff Canal and Fiery Islet, or Sunbaked Canyon and Inspiring Vantage, to, like, all fetches and all shocklands. And
sounds painful.
Like, you lose. Like, it's really nice to have Spire Bluff Canal as your first 2 lands in a deck like this, and just losing that just puts you so far behind against decks that just want to damage you. But that Boros deck is very fast, so it might be so fast they don't get caught.
So here's a question for you: with Modern Horizons 2 on the horizon, are you putting Counterspell in this deck?
In this blue-red deck? Nah.
Yeah. No?
Nah. Not in the main deck, anyway. After sideboarding, maybe.
You're going to sideboard Counterspell.
Crazier things have happened. I think you sideboarded Cancel at some point in your career, didn't you?
Yeah, but that was a slightly lower-powered format.
Slightly? I'm getting Counterspell on the sideboard.
Yeah. Yeah, but, like, on the note of Counterspell... how exciting is Counterspell for all these blue-white decks? Like, for instance, you see a million of them these days, but, like, Vinifera, I think, played a great example, or Felipe Lito, although theirs was actually Esper, I guess, but, like, all these blue-white decks that are, like, the type of thing you would expect Papa Hat, Gabriel Deceive to be playing, where there's Archmage's Charm, Encrypted Command, Force of Negation, Dovin's Veto, Mana Leak, Opt, Path to Exile, Snapcaster, and then some mix of Teferis and Jaces, along with some incidental Supreme Verdict, Timely Reinforcements type action. Counterspell is just going to be incredible for these people, right?
I mean, if I were the kind of person to play this kind of a deck, Felipe Leto played 3 Mana Leaks, for example, right? 3 Mana Leaks and 1 Drown in the Lock. I gotta imagine that even just going into the Archmage's Charm slot, certainly the 3 Mana Leaks you're gonna start there. Drown in the Lock probably gonna be on the chopping block for Counterspell. I just don't see how you wouldn't do that. I'm not saying that you would cut Logic Knot or Spell Snare, right? Esper Charm.
I would cut Logic Knot.
Okay. Before Drown in the Lock?
To. Yeah, but that's a separate thing anyway. It's not the biggest point. It's just that I think that Logic Knot's utility gets a lot lower. Like, you've already got Snapcaster Mage, and you don't super necessarily want to be trying to push that angle. So, yeah, I think once you've got access to 4 counterspells, the pressure on you to be playing Logic Knot is just, like, falls through the floor.
Yeah, so this deck is a 3 Mana Leak, 1 Logic Knot deck. You gotta... I have to imagine, I don't know if you agree, that Mana Leak's going to get the axe before Logic Knot will, but they maybe both get it.
Yeah, one, they'll probably both get it, but 2, I I don't know. Particularly if you're playing Esper, I'd rather have one Mana Leak as a 5th 2-mana counterspell than one Logic Knot. But either way, I think this is gonna like the printing of counterspell is gonna mean a little bit less Godless Shrine action, a little bit less Castle Ardenvale. You know, like you can still do that kind of stuff, but there is a little bit more pressure to have a little bit more reliable blue mana.
So I have a twofold question for you. If you like, just scroll up the page a little bit to Andrew 1232's blue red deck. This is a deck that I would rework the cards a little bit in order to get 4 counterspells in. So Andrew 1232 played 1 Mana Leak and 4 Remand and 3 Archmage's Charm. I'm for sure finding a way to get 4 counterspell into this deck if I were to play this. If I were to play like a Snapcaster Mage kind of more control-ish angle type deck, it would be this one. This deck's got 21 regular lands, but it's got like Valakut Awakening, which is only kind of sort of a spell. But it's like
Serum Visions, Remand.
Yeah, like I'm still planning to like play my lands every turn, stuff like that. I've got Snapcaster Mage. I can lock down the game with Archmage's Charm and Cryptic Command. But in addition, I've got this Through the Breach Emrakul the Aeon's Torn aspect to my deck, which I think is like very attractive. It's very similar to playing that Boros deck versus playing a Boros deck from 2 months ago in Modern, right? Like this deck is just like, all right, I'm playing a blue-red control deck. I'm going to counter that. I'm going to bounce that or whatever. I'm like, oh, just kidding. 15 ya. Haste. Right? So I really like that aspect of this deck. Just talk to me about how this deck doesn't have Expressive Iteration. That's the thing that I don't get.
I don't think Expressive Iteration is at its best in this deck at all. Like, Expressive Iteration revealing Emrakul, well, that's not good, right? Expressive Iteration revealing Valakut Awakening can be awkward. Expressive Iteration revealing Through the Breach, that's very frequently very awkward. And Expressive Iteration with the Permission, it's not good. I think you got to be really proactive to be playing Expressive Iteration. Expressive Iteration is a great card, don't get me wrong, but way too many of these the cards in this deck are either reactive or you have to set up. And Expressive Iteration is for somebody who just is go, go, go. It's a Boros player's Is It card.
I was kind of thinking maybe it's not so bad to put Emrakul on the bottom of your library, but if it's the wrong turn, you've already got the Through the Breach, that's the last thing you want to do, right?
Yeah, the whole point is to set up your combo, and it doesn't even work. Like, you could even flip both halves of your combo, and it doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
You've got Through the Breach and Emrakul. I think Expressive Iteration is just not right for this deck at all.
But now that you're saying that, I'm wondering why there's no opts. I think the Sec wants an opt now.
No. The problem is there's just too many good cards. You don't even have ops now, and you haven't even had to make room for Counterspell yet.
I mean, this deck does make room for Prismari Command, though. So, there you go.
Prismari Command's excellent. One of the things I really like about Prismari Command in this deck is that the Treasure is particularly well suited. Because you can actually make a play on turn 3, whether you're trying to set up or you're removing a Hate Bear. Whatever it is you're doing, the fact that you can use Prismari Command on turn 3 to surprise, be a turn ahead of schedule on Through the Breach is like really attractive.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can also like just get that treasure and then have like an inconvenient spell snare for your opponent, right? Like, what if you're like Through the Breach, they're like counterspell, and you're like, just kidding. That's a nice one, I think.
Sure.
So I like this deck a lot. This blue-red deck.
What did you think of the use of some of the Strixhaven stuff for the non-red decks, though? Like in Humans, the adoption of Silver Quill Silencer. You know, this is a card we talked about in previous weeks. The Orzhov Meddling Mage, but it's a little bit beefier. It's a 3/2, but it has they can still just play the card. It's just that instead of it being meddling maged, they lose 3 life and you draw a card.
So I think like if your objective is to lock somebody down with a meddling mage, Silver Quill Silencer does not do that job. However, it's still disruptive, right? So it still puts them a little behind. It has the advantage of having 3 power in a deck that is very offensive, right? Like this deck has always been, the Mantis Rider offense actually taking advantage of the Exalted on Noble Hierarch type deck. And I think the Silencer, if you name a certain type of removal card, name a certain piece that would unlock the advantage that the humans player might have, I think it has a lot of utility there. I mean, it's obviously the case.
Strong agree.
That it's not as good, or they'd be playing 4 copies instead of 2. But it's also clearly good enough as a supplement to that plan. It's already got 4 Kitesail Freebooter, 4 Meddling Mage, and good speed, right? I mean, this is also a deck with... This build in particular has got like 4 Thalia Guardian of Thraben, 4 Thalia's Lieutenant. Like, their objective is to end the game, not to keep the game locked down forever, right? Like, they're going to go for big swings powered by Thalia's Lieutenant and a little haste and, cheating with Aether Vial and Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, and so part of the thing with Silver Quill Silencer, and I think you kind of alluded to this, obviously you already have 4 meddling mages, so it's at best it's a 5th and 6th copy in that direction, but it's actually a more attractive card to lead with. Like if you have 2 meddling mages, the first one you play is frequently just going to eat a removal spell, right? But like you can't just name the removal spell, or the meddling mage hasn't necessarily even done its job. The Silver Quill Silencer, being able to just name the removal spell with Silver Quill Silencer, it's a very attractive proposition, because now not only are they giving you value if they kill the meddling mage, they have to already commit to just starting to take their lumps with the Silver Quill Silencer. And this is a pretty sweet Silver Quill Silencer meddling mage deck in the first place, because you've got Reflector Mage and Kitesail Freebooter giving you ways to know what they have.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Reflector Mage is a card that was banned in Standard, right? Eventually, it was so good. I mean, I think that this is probably the best Reflector Mage archetype of all, and of a card that was just great everywhere. It's so good in this archetype. Like, they can have their key card. You can bounce it with Reflector Mage. You can borrow the lockdown from Reflector Mage. You can keep it super lockdown with Meddling Mage if you want. You can just kill them with your Mantis Rider before they can figure out how to get out of that. And it's all free because of Aether Vial.
The Reflector Mage play is also so nice because you can Reflector Mage their card. They can't play it next turn. And then on your next turn, you can play the Silver Quill and name the card that you bounced. Just ensuring that you're getting that much more advantage.
Talk to me about the sideboard options in this build of humans. Auriok Champion, is that the card that we want for this utility, right? So 1/1 for 2, and it has protection for both black and red. I guess that's some upshot, especially against black. But it's smaller in power than Core Firewalker, and it gains less
it has
life.
good types. As humans, it's a human.
Okay.
It's just not realistic to play Core Firewalker in a deck that's using 4 Cavernous Souls and the 3 Unclaimed Territories. And, I think you really need the human part of it.
Okay.
It's just got good types.
I buy that. Now, speaking of those 2 cards, talk to me about Magus of the Moon. Because I feel like this sword has 2 edges, Magus of the Moon.
Well, so part of it is that Aether Vial obviously gets around all this, right? But second of all, you've got Noble Hierarch, which does a pretty passable job, particularly in the matchups where you would actually want Blood Moon. And third of all, at the end of the day, if you're boarding in Magus of the Moon, you kind of are generally going to be in the camp of I'm winning as long as the Magus is still in play. Yeah, and it's not like Magus is first to the party. I guess they're going to frequently come down with there's going to be some support in the leading.
Any clock is probably a good clock in that spot. How great is Blight Beetle? Oh my gosh, What you never look at this card like, oh man, what a breaker. Blight Beetle is a ridiculous breaker.
Sure, it's cool. Pretty good against all the different counter decks, obviously.
Yeah. And it's also got protection from green. I think, like, if you were just playing against some deck that had, like, green creep... I'm not talking about, like,
I don't know.
A devoted druid combo deck. Like, obviously, Blight Beetle's not going to stop them from killing you, right? But, you know, a deck that's trying to attack you with green creatures, I think is probably pretty decent at gumming up the ground.
Yeah, maybe it'll come to that.
I mean, when was the last time there was a green creature deck trying to attack you? Like, you wouldn't side this in against a Tarmogoyf, would you?
Do you remember when Tarmogoyf used to be playable?
It's in some decks still. I think it's hilarious that there are Jund Dagger decks that just don't play it. Like, most of them don't play it. They play, like, Scourge of the Skyclaves and Bomat Courier and Croxa, and they're green but don't have Tarmogoyf.
So you're going to be happy to see Yavi PV 5-0'd with on the 511 League with a black-green Tarmogoyf deck. Hex Drinker, Dark Confidant, Scavenging Ooze, Tarmogoyf, a whole bunch of usual cards like Inquisition and Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, and Abrupt Decay. It's got a little Mishra's Bauble action just so that it's got enough cards that are playable. But in the sideboard, one Witherbloom Command.
I was wondering why I was going to be the one that was happy about this deck. I do enjoy your quip about the Mishra's Bauble, and I agree. This is a Lurrus of the Dream Den deck, right? So it's got the Mishra's Bauble engine. So it is a little curtailed in its potential. It's a potential card selection because it's built around having Lurrus of the Dream Den. I don't know, man. One Witherbloom Command in the sideboard. I certainly would rather play against this deck than a deck that had, like, that Storm Life Gain card. There's none of those, right?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. Is Hexdrinker that great? Like, it's like medium exciting to me.
I don't know. I like Hex Drinker. I think the card's underrated in general.
It's in a lot of, like, seemingly, like, diverse enough builds where I'm like, okay, that's like a very aggro deck, and that one's like, oh, that's not a very aggro deck. That one's a combo-ish deck, and it's got Hex Drinker. So I'm always, like, curious when Hex Drinkers are showing up. I've actually... I used to play a lot of paper Modern, like Modern tournaments, and I don't think I've ever squared off against a Hex Drinker in real life, only a digital Hex Drinker.
Sure, but, I mean, Hex Drinker's been... A lot of Hex Drinker's life has been in the there is only digital era.
That's true. That's fair.
Or there is digital at all era, as they say. There's a little bit different of I guess Hex Drinker Tarmogoyf deck. Tubby Batman's 5-0 list with Teamer packing Expressive Iteration. You know, and this is, you know, I guess Delver of Secrets, Hex Drinker, and Tarmogoyf can be a package deal with some Brazen Borrower support. Serum Visions and Lightning Bolt, sure. 4 Force of Negation, 4 Stubborn Denial, and 4 Disrupting Shoal. Huh. And even though this is an Expressive Iteration deck, this is not my favorite Expressive Iteration deck of all time. That said, one thing I do like is that Disrupting Shoal and Force of Negation, you know, as far as counterspells that you can play off of Expressive Iteration go, they're above average.
All right, so this one I don't know. I'm giving the side eye to. First of all, Brazen Borrower, very good card. I'm a little medium on its power level for Modern. I don't think it's like, obviously in Standard it was like one of the best cards. In Modern it's seeing play in a variety of decks, but I'm medium on it. Delver, always happy to see a successful Delver deck. Oddly enough, never happy to see a successful Tarmogoyf deck. Hex Drinker, you know, it's there. The rest of these spells, like a lot of them are like, okay, Serum Visions is fine, Expressive Iteration is great, Lightning Bolt is great, and then the rest of these like blue spells are like, have been in good decks, but it's weird to me that they're all in this deck. Like, I mean, like, I played a bunch of Disrupting Shoals when it was Standard legal. I don't even remember if I played it in block, but I played it in Standard a lot. It seems to me like it's not a consistent card in this deck. There's not a wide variety of cards that you can successfully use with it. Right? Are you just going to cast it?
No. No, you're going to pitch Delver of Secrets or Serum Vision or Stubborn Denial to counter 1-cost cards without spending any mana.
So, like, if they have a 3 casting cost card, right? Like,
that's not what it's for.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
it's to pitch. You can also pitch, Disrupting Shoal if you want to counter a 2. But if you want to counter a 3, you've got Brazen Borrower and Force Negation. But it's really about countering stuff like Path to Exile.
So this deck is just like this is more of a Protect the Queen type deck?
Yes. Put down a hard-hitting threat like Hex Drinker or a Delver or Tarmogoyf and just ride it to victory.
And hope they don't have like a pretty good thing on the battlefield, because the only thing that can interact on the battlefield is 4 Lightning Bolts and 2 Brazen Borrowers, right? Everything else is before it gets there.
You just try to get your Hex Drinker up all the way and sidestep the problem.
I do like Klothys, God of Destiny. That's a hard-hitting card.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a believer in this deck. I think it's cute, but I feel like a lot of things got to line up right.
It's never turning on in this deck. You need how
I just
many
mean
pips?
in general. I just think this deck in general is not necessarily what I'm trying to do.
I understand it's a 5-0 list. I mean, obviously it came together. There's so many things that are at least causing me to scratch my head. So, not getting deck of the week for me this week. So
what's up with Grixis no Death Shadow? Death Shadowless Death Shadow. Aspiring Spikes 5-0 list is a Grixis Death Shadow deck with Expressive Iteration as a new card. But it's in place of the Death Shadows. So your only creatures are just Kroxa and Sprite Dragon. And obviously Lurrus out of the sideboard.
This is also a very weird Kroxa deck, right? So it's got 1 Unearth and 2 Kroxa. So most of the beatdown of this deck is around Sprite Dragon, I think. It's got like a lot of sweet spells, like Cling to Dust and Drown in the Lock. But you're right. This is a bit of a head scratching deck. Also, like its red cards are Expressive Iteration, Kroxa, and Lightning Bolt, which are all good cards.
Seal of Fire,
Seal of Fire. This
Sprite Dragon.
Like Seal of Fire is, if that's like either a Light Up the Stage card or a Tarmogoyf card, neither card is in this deck. So this deck is full of sweet cards.
But Expressive Iteration is a better Light Up the Stage.
Yeah, but you use Seal of Fire to turn on the Light Up the Stage. Right? You play it on turn 1 so that you can ting them and cast it for 1. Like,
you also just Seal of Fire with Lurrus, right? Isn't that the main thing?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, good point. I like most of the cards in this deck. I mean, I love an Unearth. I was a big Unearth player back in the original Unearth run in '99. I feel like you're going to be cycling Unearth more than casting it in this deck.
I don't know.
There's not a lot of beatdown in this deck.
No.
But it's highly reliant on the small amount of beatdown.
It is. Yeah, it's interesting, not having Death Shadow in this deck. That's cool.
You can cheap play Kroxa in multiple ways. Like, you could cheap it with Unearth. You could cheap it with Lurrus of the Dream Den. But those are, like, pretty weird Kroxas, right? You'd have to have like 6 mana or something for that to be interesting, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to cheap the Kroxa, then I'm going to expensive the Kroxa.
So the last last deck I guess I wanted to touch on was this Orzhov deck with the Allen 07 played with 4 Sedgemoor Witches. So it's on the surface, it's like, okay, sure, it's a black-white Stoneforge Mystic deck, Batterskull, Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice, sure. And I would guess that you're like, okay, I guess that since it has black, it's got 4 Inquisition, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Fatal Push. That all sounds reasonable. Since it's an Orzhov deck, obviously it has Kaya's Guile and Skyclave Apparition. Sure, somebody else needs to carry equipment sometimes anyway. The two new additions are both really interesting. Sedgemoor Witch as your third creature, giving you a young pyromancer sort of angle, and then the use of 4 copies, 4x of Vanishing Verse.
Yeah, so first of all, Vanishing Verse is sweet, right? This is like an instant somewhere between an Utter End and a Vindicate, right? 2 mana. I think you're going to see a lot of play from this card in various formats. I think it's particularly good in Modern because of the speed of the format and the speed of the card. But I think Sedgemoor Witch is a card that oddly I think might just be better in Modern or formats that are bigger than Standard than it will be in Standard, right? Like
I can see that.
Like 3/2 Menace for 3 is less exciting in formats where people just play like multiple 4/4s or 6/6s in their deck, which a lot of Standard decks have got. Like they'll just deploy like, all right, I have like 5/5s and 4/3s and all kinds of 6/6s. And so like, all right, I have like a 3/2 Menace for 3. I'm like, all right, you probably got in for free once, and then it just doesn't do that much in terms of its combat power, toughness ratio, right? Ward pay 3 life is way better in Modern than it is in Standard. In Standard, you have tons of decks that are like 30 plus creatures and no interaction. Like their non-creature spell is like some sort of buff spell, right? Like so, Ward is like way more exciting in formats with cards like Vanishing Verse, I think, right? So, and then third of all, the ability to generate 1/1 token creatures essentially for free, or free on cards if not free on mana, is like the classic pairing with Stoneforge Mystic, right? Stoneforge Mystic made its reputation pairing with Squadron Hawk, right? Like the fact that you can play Sedgemoor Witch with super cheap, hyper efficient cards like Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, Unearth, Cling to Dust, Fatal Push, and make guys at the same time. I mean, you are literally like doing Stoneforge Mystic's thing. This seems fantastic to me in Modern, and decidedly, maybe it'll be good in Standard still, but decidedly less exciting for Standard.
So here's a question for you. Do you really want no Lingering Souls?
That is a great question. Lingering Souls seems like it would be very good in this overall strategy for the same reasons that Sedgemoor Witch is. I mean,
and I feel like a mix is better too. Like it's like obviously Lingering Souls is a great combo with Sedgemoor Witch.
Yeah, I mean, casting Lingering Souls when you already have a Sedgemoor Witch twice.
Oh yeah,
that's nice. I can't even count that high how many tokens you would get.
Yeah. Math is for blockers anyway.
I think that would be really good. I mean, how do you feel about Skyclave Apparition? Like, this card seems very...
I like it.
It's like okay for Modern. Like, it's a 2/2 for 3.
I know. Yeah, but you got to remember, this deck has got 4 Inquisition, 4 Thoughtseize, right? And then 4 Vanishing Verse. This is like a very attrition-y deck that can just win with the one thing it has left over. You want to just obliterate. Like, in many ways, this Stoneforge deck is set up like those black-green decks, you know, where they just try to obliterate all your resources and then just win with their Tarmogoyf. But here, the one thing that you have left over is frequently a Stoneforge Mystic or a Sedgemoor Witch. The Skyclave Apparition is so good because you're left over with something that can still carry one of these pieces of equipment and be a game-winning threat, despite the fact that it can solve whatever problem you had.
Oh, I guess if you have Sword of Fire and Ice, then... Like, the thing I was really worried about is, like, people just play cards like Lightning Bolt, Lava Dart, Seal of Fire, in fact, Machine Gun, Seal of Fire, and other Luris decks. But but
the damage is already done.
No, if you've got Sword of Fire and Ice, it's fine.
You already Skyclave Apparitioned their Aether Vial, right? Or their Tarmogoyf or whatever. So even if they kill the Apparition, the damage is done.
What I'm just worried about is like its persistent ability to finish the game, right? Because this deck's
but you're
only got 12 creatures. All of them have 2 toughness.
And Shambling Vents and Batterskull, and it should probably have some Lingering Souls action. But it's also got Surprise Kaya's Guile, which can give you a token by surprise that allows you to, with value, kill your opponent's threat plus give you a 1/1 flyer that can then, when you untap, immediately pick up one of the swords.
Yeah, and if it's sort of, either sword is actually potentially generating card advantage, right? If they just killed all your guys.
Yeah.
You just start drawing cards with Sword of Fire and Ice, and Sword of Feast and Famine does what Sword... I think I would like Sword of Light and Shadow more than Sword of Feast and Famine in this deck. What do you think?
I think you would too, but I would rather have Sword of Feast and Famine.
But what are you going to... All right, I have the green sword. What am I doing with it?
Attritioning them. I'm making them discard a card while I untap all my mana.
Okay. I guess that's
all I want to do. I'm a simple man.
I want to, get back my guy that they killed because it was so small. These guys are so small. Everyone's babies.
I know. That's why you have the equipment. Well, I don't know. This is my favorite deck of the week, personally.
Yeah?
I would play Lingering Souls, but I love this approach. That said, I love it until Counterspell is legal.
I agree.
And then I'm a new man.
I agree on playing Lingering Souls. This is an inventive deck. I got to vote for that Boros deck with the Strobe and all those Leonins.
Great choice.
Minecraft. That deck seems like an annihilator to me.
Great choice. All right, man. I'm excited to finally be playing some counterspells. I think it might be time to play Stoneforge Mystic plus Jace the Mind Sculptor plus Counterspell together at last.
Oh my god. It's like Tom Martell's Grand Prix win years past. You could put Lingering Souls in that deck, Patrick.
Possibly. All right, awesome. See you next week, dude. Bye-bye.
Sin life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Also out of